Sometimes it's your environment and not necessarily you. Your environment can bring out the best in you, or it can bring out the worst in you. And understanding the difference is so important in life. And I say this as a 41-year-old, still tweaking and working on certain things. But one thing I've noticed is it's so important to understand and make sure your environment is in alignment with where you're trying to go in your life. And or sometimes you can't control having to be in there, but when you really know yourself and you learn yourself and you understand your boundaries and how much power you have about how you feel in certain environments, or when you can step out of that environment, not out of frustration, but just out of, hey, you know what, this ain't right, let me just maneuver, y'all have fun over here, let me keep it moving and do my thing over here. But if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're working on something, building something that hasn't been created before, then you need to surround yourself with other entrepreneurs, period. Because as smart and as capable as some people who've never started a business are, and maybe they're fantastic in the corporate structure and doing that W-2 job, nothing wrong with that. But making something out of nothing with zero resources, and sometimes no know-how, just learning and growing and bringing in the right people and inspiring people to join you on your journey, that that's something you learn by doing that and sticking in through it and putting yourself out there and all that. And sometimes you fail, and a lot of the greats failed at something and then eventually figured out the right path for themselves. But the right environment will can make or break you. In your environment sometimes brings certain things out of you. For my dog, it brings the silliness. For the most part, he's a little older and he's just chilling in the house. But as soon as he comes outside, he's crazy, right? So your environment can bring the best out of you. It can bring the playfulness out of you. It could bring stress and defensiveness and all these different things. Sometimes it can be you when you feel stress and anxiety. If whatever's happening and going on, you haven't done the work to ensure the feelings that you have aren't a you thing, whether it be projection and or seeing a person do what you really want to be able to do, but they're doing it. And how can she do it if you're a man sometimes? Or a black woman shows up and she's out here putting herself out there, and or people give praise, but you somehow try to bring her down. Or even family structures. Sometimes you're doing your thing, you're working hard, you're making things happen, and somebody is trying to pull you down, right? It's like crabs in a barrel. But being mindful of your environment, but it starts with you first. So you really knowing yourself, getting comfortable with that, knowing your weaknesses, knowing your strengths, knowing where you need to grow, and whatnot, but also knowing where you're going and what you need in that sense. This is personal, this is professional life, this is all those different things. Educationally, that's so important in knowing what you want out of life, because then you can know what deficits you have in order to get there. And that's important. And sometimes it's the wrong environment. You're in the wrong environment and you need to rebuild what you need in order to get where you're trying to go. Not to say if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're only hanging around with entrepreneurs, but you need to have a mix of that. There's going to be people who are doing the W-2, but they're in a field and they have certain expertise that they can bring a lot of value. But as far as entrepreneurial and creating something out of nothing, and the difficulties and the psychological feeling, the fears, especially once you go all in, that is different. And it's so important to be surrounded, or at least have a community of other entrepreneurs going on that path, because I don't want to use the word gaslit, because it's not quite that kind of, but it's really, people can be quite harmful even though they have the best intentions if they've never experienced creating something from nothing. I've noticed that validation one gets, and you need to give validation from in here and here, but in recognizing certain things, you can like appreciate others who understand the journey. If you're on your umpteenth venture and it's not your first venture, and someone who's been a serial entrepreneur and successful at that, sold companies, etc., like yeah, definitely. You don't even have to talk about your pains. They're already saying, oh yeah, that's I feel you. But they're a couple steps ahead. Sometimes you'll have people who are a few steps behind you or on this in the same journey, right? And other things about environment is, I don't mind people who hadn't had things right in relationships. I was talking to someone about what would you give for marriage tips for somebody after being married for a couple decades, right? And this person was like, "Oh, you don't want any advice from me?" And I was like, "No, actually, I'd like to hear from people whose life it isn't perfect, because you can gain so much knowledge from people who've tried and failed on things. They would have more hindsight. They would have hindsight into maybe I would have chosen a different person, or maybe I should have asked certain questions. Maybe I should have been more content with some things. I tried to make this person be this person, but they're really this. Or maybe I expressed things in a poor way and the person couldn't receive it well." I think there's so many lessons that we can learn. Also in the US, it's so easy to get divorced. So, I'll talk to the divorcees, right? Because they can have some hindsight. Sometimes it's, I pulled the trigger too soon, or I lacked patience. And, I wish I would have tried harder, whatever. There's just so much in finding partnerships and relationships. That journey, some people say, oh, you need all this time. Time helps, but if you're not dating intentionally, you will date somebody for a long time and waste a lot of time and not know them, or not know what goals they have or where they want to go in life, and that they can commit and show up in that way. I think when you get older, it's a little easier to be very clear, and age doesn't necessarily get you there. It's really the experience, also the desire to learn and grow. This little disrespectful fly. So there's that relationship. There's also so really understanding when you're in that space of people whose life just worked out for them and they hadn't had any issues. Maybe they live in another state and culture is different around dating, right? Also work. Understanding what you're trying to get out of working for a company. Sometimes we get all the things that we absolutely need from the company, but then we're so distracted by the things that cause us fear and the things that we're not getting from the company or people, or promotion, and we may move along sooner than what we should. But understanding your environment really starts with understanding you and doing the work and taking the time to do a deep dive on yourself. And when you do a deep dive on yourself, you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and really what drives you and gets you excited, where you can be content, where your boundaries sit, etc. And you can show up authentically yourself when you really have that, when you've worked through those things. And showing up authentically yourself also, for me, it means you know yourself. You're not afraid to ask questions or be imperfect or whatever have you. You're not afraid to challenge in a healthy way. Share your opinions. People might not like your opinions. Who cares? But an opinion is an opinion, and that's up for someone to be able to say, hey, maybe how about this? Or hey, I didn't appreciate this, right? That's something in our power that we can do. And a lot of people don't exercise communication and good conflict resolution. And in a poor environment, some people will have you thinking you're wrong for disrupting their comfort level because, oh, we stay silent and we just accept the discomfort, or you must conform to us in order to be respected and whatnot. So, but there's a level of understanding who you are and being so comfortable in that you're not desperate for people to be around you or to be around other people who don't align with your values and your vision for your life. And we can all have different visions, but the values piece and character, so important. And managing your environment, and again, sometimes you can't control exactly, if you have to be there, you have to be there, but your length of time in it and your length of time spent with some people you don't have to spend, for fear of disrupting the system. You don't have to have extended amount of time. If you find yourself having to shut your mouth with peers, like, and doing certain things. And I'm an observant person. I've seen people do these kind of things. I've done it not intentionally, but through like just trauma and like um, freeze responses. That's been something. Sometimes overthinking. Some spaces you need to just chill and like, I think at work there's a time and a place, especially depending upon where you sit in the hierarchy. There's a time and a place, and there's a way, right? In learning environments, in friend groups with peers, you should not be penalized for having ideas that may be different. That's the beauty of the world, is different, being different. But when you recognize the environment is not for you, whether it be that it is toxicity, and run away from gossip. If someone gossips about someone else, they will gossip about you, right? Right now, you might be the exception to the rule, but when you fall out of good graces, maybe you change jobs, maybe you lose your job, maybe life really happens, right? Um, People show who they are. But if you see them not being so nice, that is, think about that at that core. They may treat you well, but watch how they treat other people. That is so telling and so important about how close do you want this person to be with you. And you should be protecting your space and your environment. And when you show up authentically yourself and you know yourself, you will be they will be repelled by you, right? If the requirement is to not have boundaries and for them to get whatever they want out of you and you to stay small or whatever have you, they will be repelled by you, and that is a blessing. It is a blessing to be rejected in some cases, right? Because that leaves room for the right people to show up. When you show up authentically yourself, you stand up for what's right, where it makes sense, right? You share your ideas. That opens up permission for others as well, especially if you can handle it. And the way I think about it is, where I want to go, I've recognized that criticism will come from everywhere, right? There's going to be people who really like you, but there's always that group of people on the internet that will want to talk down on you. And I think as you assess where you're going, you have to recognize and level up and be resilient to certain things like that. So if you make sure you're building an environment for yourself that is safe, that you can grow, having that counterbalance when the world is a hot mess, and then having these safe spaces of really good people that help you grow and become a better person, and help you get to where you want to go by many means, right? Sometimes they know a contact, sometimes they can do that. Sometimes they just show up as an amazing person and you get inspired and grow from that. That's helped me a lot, having amazing friends and people who show up amazingly. That's like a little mirror. And then also, as I've grown, is like noticing if I'm jealous, if I feel this ick or something, I look internally first and I'm like, what is it in them that's getting me this way? And we can assess that. Is it them or is it me? Is it both? So your environment is one of those things that it's a beautiful thing to recognize what you need where it's not aligning, where you have the opportunity to address situations safely. And if you address them safely and you're met with a poor response, that's intel, and that gives you a chance to recalibrate. So just remember that in life. If you are younger, even if you're older, but if you are younger, recognize your environment can be that and not you. That's the best thing I ever noticed in life, and it was able that recognition helped me curate an environment that helped me go from disorganized attachment to secure or insecure. And it also helps me now recognize, oh, here's a little opportunity for me to grow, as well as here's some gaps that I have that I need for myself to be happy and feel fulfilled of having certain types of people around. And it's cool to notice amazing people show up for you, especially those when you're showing up authentically. Those people who pop up and really appreciate how you show up. And that also is just a reminder too. Sometimes people are not on the same page as you. I had some problems with a group of folks, and I'm like, I look back and I'm like, they're like 10 years younger than me, maybe more. What am I tripping about? Like, go ahead, child. Even though that puts you at like 30, or whatever have you. But taking that step back and then just being like, oh, it's like, God, please give me the strength to forgive them. If they circle back many years from now, let's put it in that bucket of they needed to grow. I've grown in the past, well, all the time, right? But in the past 5 years, I took a deep dive on myself. So there's that. But anyone who's struggling, recognize, is it your environment or is it really you? It could be your environment, and you need to go put in effort to find a new one or spend more time in that new one to get yourself in a better place into where you are going. And no shade to anybody else who's not going on that journey, but figure out what's best for you. Do the internal work so you can show up as your best self and achieve what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes it's not you, it's your environment.